Alright guys, we are playing some Rabbit and Steel today. Extra mode just came out, so we're going to be playing the Grenadier Rabbit. The Grenadier Rabbit has a pistol with 6 shots for your primary, and your secondary just reloads your pistol. The pistol fires very quickly. It has a half-second GCD, but the reload is very slow. It takes 1.5 seconds and it doesn't even do any damage. So the trick here is that after you fire all your shots and you have to reload, as soon as you start your reload process, you can hit your defensive ability, if it is off cooldown, and your defensive for the Grenadier Rabbit, in addition to making you invincible and clearing bullets around you, that kind of stuff that it does for every rabbit. For the Grenadier Rabbit, it immediately ends the GCD of whatever ability you are using, allowing you to act again as soon as you hit the defensive button. So you can tap your reload, then do an action reload if you're a Gears of War's player, and just immediately cut off that reload and get to firing again. It's pretty fun, and has some interesting implications that we'll get into a little later down the line. For our first loot item here, you can pause and read things as you'd like. We're going to end up going with the Chemist's Coat. Because we use our defensive so frequently for our DPS rotation, pretty much using it anytime it's off cooldown and I want to use my secondary, we will be keeping up that poison, not 100% because our defensive has more than a 5-second cooldown, but we'll be getting enough out of it that I think it'll be worth more than the lower damage poison that would have been on the primary from that other poison item there. And I do like building into poison or damage over time effects on the Grenadier Rabbit. Because your primary fires so fast, I think she is well set up for the loot items that pay you off for dealing damage multiple times, and a lot of those items increment your DPS damage as well. Here, I could take Trick Shield. Again, I'm using my defensive after my secondary pretty much every time, so that's just 350 damage every time I tap my defensive ability. But what we're actually going to go with here is the Sawtooth Cleaver. Our primary fires through enemies, but that's not its radius. Its radius is its width here, and you can see it did get narrower than it was before. And that is going to affect our ability to kind of wing the enemies, like clip the edges of them with our shot. But most of the time I am firing right, more or less center mass here, so the lowered radius isn't really going to affect us too much. This enemy is getting absolutely cooked. The primary's ability to fire through all enemies, as well as the secondary, or not our secondary, our special, our grenade being an AoE, means that we are damaging the boss, as well as all their summons, which damages the boss. So, cleared that one pretty easily. Tassha here for Shopkeeper, another fun new feature from Extra Mode is that added some new shopkeepers. Let's see, this primary upgrade there turns it into a rocket launcher. The secondary upgrade here augments your primary, not your secondary itself, which is pretty neat. And it's the same thing with your special here. Your special and defensive upgrades both augment your special. Your primary and secondary upgrades both augment your primary. We're going to take a secondary upgrade here that basically just makes our primary better. More damage, it cancels out that radius decrease we got before by increasing the radius again, and importantly it also gives us more ammo, so we don't have to reload as often. Pretty generically good upgrade, I feel. I take it here mostly because I didn't really feel that into any of the other ones with what we've got going on so far. So this boss here has these spinning beams, I guess you would call them, that are a kind of a signature feature for this Dark House Depths, this new zone here. This boss here features another kind of, not a new mechanic here with getting knocked around and then doing these expanding zones. The dragons do this a lot. But it is something that we will definitely see in this stage's final boss. For those of you who have played this game before, you know that these kind of lead-up fights here, these first 2 or 3 fights in the zone, usually are just going to prepare you for the 2 big fights, which we're going to go into our first one here, our mini-boss, Arene, the Dying Ember. So her trick is that she's going to place these circles, and she's going to say, get in the circle, and then she's going to try to kill you when you are in the circle. So the trick is to get into the circle right before it finishes. So there's some leeway there, but you want to get in the circle, but not necessarily stay in the circle, or you want to get in the circle and then immediately get out of it as soon as you're done. So here she's, placing these rotating beams, get in the circle, wait. Not too bad, but you want to make sure that you're not getting pushed out of the circle by the rotating beams. Make sure you're not in the wrong little wedge there. This one's a little trickier. We can get in the circle alright, but then it is going to do this expansion there to boot us out of it, then force us to run to this next one. As you can see here, I try to inch into the next wedge, but I don't get out of the expansion there, so I do take some damage. Alright, this is another part of the face where you're going to get into the circle. She's going to flip you over to the other side there while firing those side beams, and then you got to do it all over again. You really want to get off center of those side beams pretty quickly. I screw up and take damage there because I reload when I shouldn't. Reloading does slow down your movement speed. This is pretty common for abilities in this game, is a lot of them slow down your movement speed while they're firing. There are ways around this, of course, but I basically just don't manage my timing well and don't get to the circle before it closes. This phase of the fight is pretty easy, and we are going to kill her before we get to the next one. Solid fight. We took 2 damage that our regen potion will heal off. This treasure chest would have healed us up anyway, so a bit of wasted money on the regen potion, but better safe than sorry. You can pause and read the items here again. I believe we're going to be going with the Polar Coat. The Deep Freeze mechanic is another new one for this this expansion. Basically, it deals more and more damage each time you apply it, up to a cap. And you can see here the debuff lasts for 20 seconds, and we are using our defensive enough that we are going to be within that 20-second window. So I think we'll get more damage out of it than we will out of the other freeze item that required you to stand still. Alright, the boss for this zone, Farah, the Witch's Loyal Hound. Pretty fun boss fight, I would say. So here's those spanning beams, and we're getting knocked around. As I said, these are mechanics we saw earlier, and now they're all coming together here in the most dangerous of ways. Farah likes to knock you into a zone that is about to be very dangerous. So she knocks us in there, and I actually don't place myself properly. I get clipped by one of those beams. Line myself up a little better this time. And, this one here, she's going to pull you into kind of this nexus of pain, or whatever you would like to call it. When you are repositioning yourself here, make sure you pay attention to what direction the beams are rotating before they fire, because they move as soon as they start firing. So here I'm going to cut it a little close, but thankfully get away from it before we get clipped again. This third phase here, she's going to knock you down, fire beams from the side, and then tell you to get in the circle. Here I fall for the bait here. I get into the circle ahead of time and get clipped by the beams. The beams fire after the knockback, but before the circle closes. You have time to avoid the beams and then get into the circle, as I did there. Alright, so this one she says, follow me, and you should. This time she's not bluffing, so she has actually leashed us to her, so we're stuck together, and she's gonna, pull us into a zone that is about to be harmful and force us to quickly adapt and figure out where our safe zone is. I believe I used my defensive there to avoid getting clipped. Alright, and we got through phase 1, so you can see the boss is about to get a health refill, but we're actually clipping through that health bar pretty decently here. Alright, so once again, follow me, get on top of the boss, avoid our zones, don't have to worry about aiming when you're literally on top of a huge boss, so that's nice. This next phase here is going to try to knock you out into the edges of the zone where these circles are the waves are expanding, and then she's going to put up this electric barrier. And if you get knocked into that, you take damage as well. So again, just making sure that you are safely repositioned, prepared for the knockback. Here I do not prepare for the knockback, and as you see, I actually take 2 damage for getting knocked into the electric barrier. I'm not sure there was anything in the base game that did 2 damage. So that's pretty scary, Farah. This part of the fight is pretty easy, though. Just stay in the circle, wiggle back and forth. If you've beaten Ronali, you can finish that part. Here we are back into the electric zone, and this time with some rotating fans. Here, you just rotate with them. Make sure that you are kind of positioned so that you can correct if you don't gauge the knockback properly. As as you saw there, I got knocked a little bit further back than I liked, but I had time to pull myself forward here. You're going to want to stay in this middle row here, and just kind of adjust quickly once you see. Keep an eye on the expanding zones on the side. I think sometimes instead of doing a 4 and a 4, you can do a 3 and a 5. And then, have to just pull yourself off center a little. We are going to kill her here, though, before we get to the next phase. Having decent damage, you can see 395. It's not the most damage you could have at this part of the game, but it is respectable. Oh, look, some dialogue here. I'm gonna let you guys read along if you would like. Yeah? Stuff's going swell down here, as you can see. Here's another new shopkeeper. You can't pet this one, though. You should try, though. At least 10 times. As far as upgrades here, I feel that because we took the secondary upgrade for the first shop, we're really kind of pushed into taking a primary upgrade here if it fits. And I think this is a pretty good primary upgrade. The Sapphire pistol shot turns it into kind of a machine pistol that auto-aims, so instead of firing straight ahead of us, it'll just kind of aim at the nearest enemy, or at the enemy that we are locked onto and deal damage there. It no longer pierces, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I feel that the overall DPS upgrade and the ability to hit enemies who are above or below us more than makes up for that. The Sapphire upgrades, as you can see here, really play into the hitting things multiple times angle. And if we had gotten some of those loot items I mentioned that pay off for hitting multiple times, I might have been tempted into taking one of those, but our primary upgrade also hits multiple times, so I feel like this was the clear choice this time around. And we get into this phase here. So, the trick with this zone is that enemies this is like the summoner zone. So enemies are pulling up summons here, and I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but dealing damage to the summons does deal damage to the boss. As you can see there, when I picked off that summon that spawned in front of me, it did deal some damage to the Sea-Beast Capricorn. This fight is pretty simple. If you can quickly clear at least one of the summons, like the one that is on your side, then there's almost no danger. I wish I could say as much for this boss, though. I have a tendency to get clipped by this dragon quite a bit. So she puts these big, slow-moving hitboxes on the screen, and then asks you to reposition, to identify where the safe space is and reposition around them. I have a habit of just running into them because I am, I don't know, kind of a dummy sometimes. We all have those moments, right, guys? Fortunately, our damage here is going to get us out before we have to risk taking another hit. 884 is a respectable amount of DPS. And the Eternal Bloom. This boss kills me, man. This boss beats me up all the time. I am pretty bad about, yeah, as you can see there, timing the last-minute dodges on the butterflies. So for this phase now, I have to do that while getting in and out of these circles. I actually find it easier when I screw it up there, but I do find this phase easier than the first one, actually. I don't know if the butterflies fire slower or if being told where to go just takes a load off my mind. And then this one, I always take a little bit of damage on this phase, and since I'm on 1 HP, you can, yeah, guess how that'll end. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.